Rejected Omega was declared barren forever. Oh my gosh, this is disheartening. The shocking news, however, she later gave birth to the first ever triplet alphas in the kingdom. You see, the Moonstone Kingdom had very specific ideas about what made an Omega valuable. Fertility topped the list, and Omega's worth was measured in her ability to bear strong pups, preferably alphas, who would grow into powerful warriors and leaders. Beauty came second, the kind that pleased an alpha's eyes and made other packs envious. Obedience ranked third, the quiet compliance that made pack life run smoothly. Sage Winterborn possessed exactly none of these qualities in the eyes of those who mattered. At 26, she stood in the grand hall of the Silvermoon Pack, the most powerful pack in the kingdom, and listened to her mate of 3 years publicly sever their bond before the entire pack assembly. Alpha Darius Silvermoon, golden and perfect and cruel, stood on the raised dais with his hand already reaching toward another woman while he spoke the words that would destroy Sage's life. I, Darius Silvermoon, Alpha of the Silvermoon Pack, reject you, Sage Winterborn, as my mate and bonded partner. His voice carried easily across the cavernous hall, each word precisely enunciated for maximum impact. The mate bond between us is hereby dissolved by my will and witnessed by this pack. Sage felt the bond tear away, like flesh ripping from bone. The pain was indescribable, a sensation of something vital being violently extracted, leaving a gaping wound in her chest where their connection had lived for 3 years. Her knees buckled, and only her grip on the chair beside her kept her upright. She would not collapse, would not give him that satisfaction. The grounds for rejection, Darius continued, his ice-blue eyes cold as he looked past her rather than at her, are clearly stated in pack law. After 3 years of bonding, no pups have been conceived. The pack physician has examined her extensively and determined that Sage Winterborn is barren, incapable of bearing children. An Omega who cannot produce heirs is useless to an Alpha and to the pack. Murmurs rippled through the assembled wolves. Some sympathetic, most judgmental. Sage heard the whispers clearly with her enhanced hearing. Always knew something was wrong with her. 3 years and nothing? Clearly defective. Alpha Darius deserves better, deserves strong sons. Omegas have one job, really. Dr. Helena Frost, the pack physician who'd conducted the examinations, stood near the dais with her medical reports clutched like weapons. She was a beta, cold and clinical, who'd poked and prodded Sage for months before delivering her verdict. Severe reproductive abnormalities. Scarring of the uterine lining. Hormonal deficiencies. This Omega will never conceive. I recommend rejection so the Alpha may bond with a fertile mate. Never mind that Sage had been perfectly healthy before bonding with Darius. Never mind that the examinations had been invasive, humiliating, and conducted with an audience of pack elders watching to verify the findings. Never mind that no one had asked why an Omega who came from a fertile bloodline, her mother had borne 6 healthy pups, would suddenly be unable to conceive. None of that mattered when an Alpha wanted an excuse to replace you. Furthermore, Darius said, his tone taking on a note of false magnanimity that made Sage's stomach churn. I hereby grant Sage Winterborn her freedom from this pack. She is no longer Silvermoon. She may keep the name Winterborn and seek acceptance in another pack, though I doubt any Alpha will bond with a barren Omega. He paused for effect. I am not completely without mercy. She has until sunrise tomorrow to gather her possessions and leave pack territory. Any pack member who aids her after that deadline will face charges of harboring a rejected wolf. Sage finally lifted her eyes to meet his. For just a moment, she saw something flicker in his expression. Guilt, perhaps, or uncertainty. But then, the woman beside him, Aurora Goldleaf, placed a possessive hand on his arm, and whatever doubt he'd felt vanished. Aurora was everything Sage wasn't, tall and willowy where Sage was short and curvy, platinum blonde where Sage had dark chestnut hair, Ice Queen beautiful where Sage was merely pretty. She was also a high-ranking beta from a powerful family, and, most importantly, she'd already borne 2 alpha pups to her previous mate before he died in territorial disputes. Proven fertility. That's what Darius wanted. That's what Sage couldn't provide. Do you accept this rejection? Darius asked, the formal question required by pack law. Sage could refuse, could fight the rejection, demand a tribunal, appeal to the Council of Alphas. But what would be the point? She'd still be barren in their eyes, still be useless, and staying in a pack where her mate wanted her gone and the pack physician had declared her defective would be a special kind of torture. I accept, she said, her voice steady despite the agony in her chest. The bond is severed. I am no longer Silvermoon. The formal words sealed it. The remaining threads of the mate bond disintegrated completely, leaving Sage feeling hollow and incomplete in a way that had nothing to do with being alone and everything to do with having been forcibly disconnected from someone who'd claimed to love her. Darius didn't even look at her as he turned to Aurora, already dismissing Sage from his attention. Let us proceed with the bonding ceremony. The pack deserves a Luna who can provide heirs. Sage turned and walked from the grand hall with her head high, her spine straight, and her heart shattered into pieces she'd have to figure out how to reassemble later. Behind her, the pack began preparing for Darius and Aurora's bonding, replacing her before she'd even left the building. She had until sunrise, approximately 8 hours to pack 3 years of her life and disappear. Her small cottage on the edge of Packlands, the one Darius had given her when they'd bonded, too small for the Alpha's mansion, but suitable for an Omega, felt different already. The mate bond's absence made familiar spaces strange, as if she were seeing everything through warped glass. Sage moved mechanically through the rooms, packing essentials into the worn backpack she'd brought with her 3 years ago. Clothes, toiletries, the small amount of money she'd saved from her work at the pack school. She left behind the expensive dresses Darius had bought her, the jewelry, the gifts meant to display his generosity. She wanted nothing that belonged to him. She was folding her grandmother's quilt, the only thing of real value she owned, when the knock came. "It's me," a voice said through the door. "Please let me in." Sage opened the door to find Lydia Chen, her closest friend in the pack, standing on the doorstep with tears streaming down her face. Lydia was a beta, mated to one of Darius's lieutenants with 3 young pups of her own. "I'm so sorry," Lydia sobbed, pulling Sage into a fierce hug. "I'm so sorry. This is wrong. What he did. It's cruel and wrong and—" "It's done," Sage said, her voice flat. She couldn't afford to break down. "Not yet. I have to leave by sunrise." "Where will you go?" "I don't know. Another pack, maybe, if anyone will take me." Sage pulled back, forcing a smile she didn't feel. "Or I'll go rogue. Live in the woods. Become one of those mysterious hermit wolves people tell stories about." "This isn't funny, Sage." "I know." The smile crumbled. "I know it's not funny, but if I don't make jokes, I'm going to fall apart, and I can't afford to do that until I'm far away from here." Lydia pressed something into Sage's hand, a small leather pouch that clinked with the sound of coins. "It's not much. Everything I had saved. Take it. Please. You'll need it." "Lydia, I can't." "You can and you will. Marcus doesn't know I'm here, and he'd kill me if he found out I was helping you. But I don't care. You're my friend. What they did to you is barbaric." Lydia's eyes blazed with rare fury. "I don't care what Dr. Frost says. I don't believe you're Barren. I think—" She stopped, looking around nervously, as if the walls might report her words. "You think what?" "I think Dr. Frost lied," Lydia whispered. "I think Darius wanted Aurora from the moment her previous mate died, and he needed an excuse to break your bond. Being Barren was convenient, and Dr. Frost has always been loyal to whatever Alpha pays her." The words hit Sage like a physical blow. "You think he planned this? All of it?" "I don't have proof, but yes. I think he's been dosing you with something. Contraceptive herbs or worse. Making sure you couldn't conceive so he'd have grounds for rejection." Lydia squeezed her hands. "I'm so sorry. I should have said something sooner. Should have helped you." "It wouldn't have mattered," Sage said hollowly. Even if you told me, even if I'd confronted him, who would have believed me over an alpha and a pack physician? Still, you deserve to know you weren't broken. You're not barren, Sage. You're just unlucky in your mate. After Lydia left, Sage finished packing in numb silence. She didn't know if Lydia's theory was correct. Maybe she really was defective. Maybe her body really couldn't bear pups, but it didn't matter now. She was rejected, cast out, labeled useless. By her wolf's biology and the pack's judgment, she was nothing. At dawn, Sage shouldered her backpack, took one last look at the cottage that had briefly been home, and walked into the forest beyond pack borders. She didn't look back. Looking back would make her remember what she'd lost, and she needed to focus on surviving what came next. Behind her, the Silver Moon pack woke to a new day, a new Luna, and the absence of the Omega they deemed worthless. None of them could have predicted that the wolf they'd cast out would return 3 years later, carrying the most powerful bloodline the kingdom had ever seen. But that story started with survival, and survival started with one step forward, then another, into an uncertain future. Alone, rejected, and supposedly barren, Sage Winterborn walked into the wilderness and disappeared. 3 months of wandering taught Sage what the pack had never bothered to show her. She was stronger than anyone had given her credit for. She'd traveled from pack to pack, seeking acceptance, and been turned away by each one. Word traveled fast in the kingdom. A rejected Omega, declared barren by a pack physician, carried a stigma that made her untouchable. No alpha wanted a mate who couldn't bear heirs. No pack wanted an Omega who couldn't contribute through children. "We appreciate your interest," the Silver Ridge Alpha had said politely but firmly. "But our pack has no place for non-breeding Omegas. We need every member to contribute to our growth." The Riverwood pack hadn't even let her pass their borders. "Barren wolves bring bad luck," their beta had announced through the boundary line. "The moon goddess has cursed you. We want no part of that curse." The Crimson Veil Alpha had been crueler. "What would we do with you? You can't breed, you're not particularly skilled in anything useful, and you're mated bonded damaged goods. You're more burden than asset." After 6 rejections, Sage stopped trying. She headed into the Deepwood, the vast, wild forest that occupied the kingdom's northern reaches, where few pack wolves ventured and rogue wolves carved out dangerous territories. She built a small shelter in a clearing near a stream, using skills half remembered from her childhood before her parents had died and she'd been absorbed into the Silver Moon Pack's orphan program. She hunted small game, foraged for edible plants, and learned to trust her wolf instincts in ways pack life had never required. It was during her 4th month alone that she realized something was different. The nausea hit first. Sage had been checking her snare lines when her stomach suddenly revolted, sending her stumbling to the nearby bushes where she retched violently. She assumed she'd eaten something that disagreed with her. Foraged mushrooms could be tricky, but the nausea persisted. Every morning for a week, then 2 weeks, then a month. The fatigue came next. Sage, who'd always been energetic, found herself exhausted by mid-afternoon, needing to rest when she should have been hunting or gathering. The tender breasts, the heightened sense of smell, the strange cravings for food she didn't have access to. All of it accumulated until even her wolf, who'd been depressed and listless since the rejection, began paying attention. Asterisk. "Something is different, Asterisk," her wolf insisted. Asterisk. "We are different, Asterisk." Sage denied it for another week. It was impossible. Dr. Frost had been clear. Barren, unable to conceive, reproductively defective. Those weren't words that allowed for alternative interpretations. But her body knew what her mind refused to accept. She was pregnant. The realization hit her one morning as she lay in her small shelter, hand pressed against her still flat abdomen, where 3 distinct heartbeats pulsed with life she couldn't deny. Not 1. 3. 3 lives growing inside the wolf everyone had declared barren. Sage laughed until she cried, the sound echoing through the empty forest, bitter and triumphant and terrified all at once. She was going to have pups. After being told it was impossible, after being rejected for her supposed inability to conceive, she was carrying life. Lydia was right, she whispered to the empty air. He was dosing me with something, making sure I couldn't conceive while we were bonded so he'd have grounds for rejection. The fury that washed through her was hot and cleansing. Darius had deliberately sabotaged her fertility, ruined her reputation, cast her out, and now she was pregnant with, she assumed, his pups. Pups he'd never know existed. Pups he didn't deserve. For 3 days, Sage wrestled with her options. She could try to return to Silvermoon, prove she wasn't barren. Demand Darius acknowledge his pups, but the thought of crawling back to the pack that had cast her out, of raising her children where they'd always be seen as the offspring of a rejected Omega, made her wolf snarl with protective fury. These pups deserve better. She decided to stay in the deep wood, to raise her children alone, away from packs that measured worth in bloodlines and power. She'd keep them safe, teach them to be strong, and make sure they never felt the shame she'd endured. The pregnancy progressed strangely. By month 3, Sage should have been showing slightly. Instead, her abdomen swelled noticeably, as if she were carrying far more than one pup. By month 4, she looked 6 months pregnant, her small frame struggling with the weight and size. "Something's wrong," she muttered, running her hands over her distended belly. "This isn't normal." She'd helped with enough pack births to know that even twins rarely cause this much expansion this quickly. But she had no physician, no experienced elder to consult, no resources beyond her own increasingly worried instincts. Month 5 brought complications. Pain that lanced through her abdomen at odd hours, leaving her gasping and clutching her belly. Pressure that made walking difficult. Exhaustion so profound she could barely leave her shelter. And the certainty, bone deep and terrifying, that she was running out of time. Sage was checking her snare lines, moving slowly through the forest, when the first contraction hit. Real labor, unmistakable and agonizing, 3 weeks earlier than even her accelerated pregnancy should have reached term. She barely made it back to her shelter before her water broke. What followed was a nightmare of pain, fear, and desperate instinct. Sage had no one to help, no physician to guide her, no pack members to support her through labor. Just her, alone in a forest shelter, giving birth to pups she'd been told she could never have. The first pup arrived after 6 hours of labor that left Sage sobbing and exhausted. A boy, perfect and tiny, who let out a strong cry that filled the shelter with sound. She cleaned him with trembling hands, wrapped him in the softest cloth she had, and felt her heart expand with fierce love. But the contractions didn't stop. The second pup came an hour later, after renewed agony that made Sage scream until her throat was raw. Another boy, slightly smaller than his brother, but equally healthy, equally perfect, equally hers. Still, the contractions continued. The third pup nearly killed her. Sage was beyond exhausted, beyond pain, operating on pure stubborn will and the primal drive to protect her young. When the final boy emerged, larger than his brothers, with a shock of dark hair, Sage collapsed backward, trembling and weak, barely conscious. 3 boys. 3 healthy, perfect boys, all crying with impressive lung power. Triplets, as Sage held her 3 sons against her chest, feeding them one at a time with the instinctive knowledge that came with being a mother. She counted their heartbeats and felt something shift in her understanding of the world. These pups were different. Even newborn, even barely hours old, they emanated a presence that made Sage's wolf sit up and take notice. Power. These weren't beta pups or even regular alpha pups. These were something extraordinary. For 6 months, Sage raised her 3 sons in isolation, watching them grow with a mixture of pride, wonder, and increasing concern. They grew faster than normal pups. By 3 months, they were the size of 6-month-olds. By 6 months, they appeared nearly a year old, crawling and babbling and showing personalities that were already distinct. Kieran, the firstborn, was serious and watchful, his gray eyes taking in everything with an intensity that seemed wrong for a baby. He rarely cried, but when he did, the sound made birds scatter from nearby trees. Rowan, the middle child, was gentle and curious, with green eyes that missed nothing. He'd started shifting partially, just his hands, just for seconds, at 5 months old, which should have been impossible for a pup under 2 years. Ash, the youngest but largest, was fierce and protective, his golden eyes tracking his mother's movements constantly. When a bear had wandered too close to their shelter, 4-month-old Ash had let out a growl that sent the much larger predator running. These were not normal wolf pups. Sage knew that, accepted that, but she had no framework for understanding what they actually were. The answer came on a cold autumn morning when a rogue wolf named Marcus Blackthorn stumbled into her clearing, wounded and desperate. "Please," he gasped, collapsing near her fire. "Hunters. Silver weapons. Can't shift to heal. Please." Sage's first instinct was to protect her pups. She snatched all 3 into her arms, ready to run. But the rogue was clearly dying, bleeding from multiple wounds, and something in Sage couldn't let another wolf die when she had the ability to help. She brought him water, cleaned his wounds with the herbs she'd learned to use, and wrapped him in spare blankets while her pups watched from their basket with unnervingly alert eyes. "You have pups," Marcus rasped after drinking. "Alone? That's dangerous." "I manage," Sage replied curtly, not interested in explanations. "They smell different." Marcus's eyes, clearer now that he'd had water and rest, focused on the basket. "Strong. Very strong. How old?" 6 months. "Impossible. They're too large for 6 months. Too aware." He pushed himself up on one elbow, studying the pups with renewed interest. "May I?" Sage hesitated, but something in the rogue's expression was honest rather than threatening. She brought the basket closer. Marcus looked at each pup carefully, his expression growing more shocked with each examination. "Do you know what you have here?" "My sons," Sage said defensively. "Yes, but they're not just pups. They're—" He met her eyes, his own filled with awe and disbelief. "These are true alphas. All 3. Do you understand what that means?" Sage's heart stopped. "That's not possible. True alphas are born maybe once in a generation. Having 3 in one litter, that's never happened. It can't have happened." "Look at them," Marcus insisted. "Really look. See the way they hold themselves even at 6 months? The way their presence fills the space? The accelerated growth and development." He pointed to each in turn. "This one's eyes. They're already showing alpha gold. This one partially shifted at what? 4 months? 5? And this one—" He gestured to Ash. This one growled and a predator ran. "These aren't regular alpha pups. These are the kind of alphas that reshape kingdoms." Sage's hands trembled as she looked at her sons with new understanding. True alphas were legends, wolves born with such concentrated power that they could command any wolf regardless of pack bonds, whose strength in wolf form was unmatched, who were destined to lead. "If word gets out," Marcus said quietly, "every pack in the kingdom will come for them. They'll want to claim them, control them, use them. These pups are political power made flesh. They're the kind of bloodline that starts wars." "No one knows about them," Sage said quickly. "We've been alone since they were born. I can keep us hidden." "You can't. Not forever." Marcus sat up fully now, his wounds healing faster than they should have thanks to his wolf. "They're growing too fast. In a year, maybe 2, they'll look like young boys when they should still be toddlers. Their power will be obvious. You can't hide what they are." "Then what am I supposed to do?" Sage's voice broke. "I'm a rejected Omega. I have no pack, no protection, no resources. I can't go back to Silvermoon. They'd take my sons from me, raise them as Darius's heirs, even though he rejected me for being Barren. I can't go to another pack because they'd use my sons for political advantage. Where am I supposed to go?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then, "There's a place. Far north, in the Frost Peak Mountains. A sanctuary for rogues, outcasts, and wolves who don't fit into pack society. It's led by an old alpha named Thorn Frostborn. He's ancient, wise, and more importantly, he doesn't play pack politics. If anywhere would let you and your sons exist in peace, it's there. Why would he take us in? Because he collects the extraordinary, Marcus said simply. And your sons are the most extraordinary wolves I've ever encountered. Sage looked at her 3 sons, now all watching this conversation with those 2 intelligent eyes, and made a decision born of desperation and fierce maternal protection. How do I find this sanctuary? Marcus gave her directions, a 2-week journey north through dangerous terrain, and a token, a small carved wolf that would identify her as someone sent by him. Thorn will see you. What happens after that is up to him. But it's your best chance. After Marcus left, healed enough to travel, grateful enough to promise he'd never speak of her sons, Sage began preparing for the journey north. It would be dangerous traveling with 3 young pups, but staying here was more dangerous now that she understood what her sons were. True alphas, the first triplet alphas in recorded kingdom history. The pups Sage had carried were going to change everything. The journey to Frost Peak Sanctuary took 3 weeks instead of 2, because traveling with 3 6-month-old pups was exactly as difficult as it sounded, even when those pups were abnormally advanced. Sage fashioned a carrier that let her keep all 3 close, Kieran on her back, Rowan and Ash strapped to her front, and moved through the wilderness like a woman possessed. She avoided pack territories, stuck to game trails, and hunted only when absolutely necessary. The pups, remarkably, seemed to understand the danger. They rarely cried, stayed alert, and, most disturbing, seemed to communicate with each other through glances and small sounds that went beyond normal infant behavior. When they finally crested the last ridge and saw the sanctuary spread out in the valley below, Sage nearly collapsed with relief. It wasn't what she'd expected. Instead of a fortress or stronghold, the sanctuary was a small village of mixed architecture. Traditional dens built into the mountainside alongside human-style cabins, communal buildings, training grounds, and agricultural terraces that shouldn't have been possible at this altitude. Wolves moved through the space with easy familiarity, rogues by their scent, but organized and purposeful rather than the chaotic violence she'd been taught to expect from packless wolves. "Stop there!" a voice called from above. Sage looked up to find a young woman perched in a tree, a bow drawn and arrow pointed at Sage's chest. "State your business." "I'm here to see Alpha Thorn," Sage replied, slowly reaching into her pocket for the carved wolf Marcus had given her. "Marcus Blackthorn sent me." The woman's expression shifted from suspicion to curiosity. "Marcus? Haven't seen him in 2 years. What's that old rogue doing now?" "Surviving. He said Alpha Thorn might grant me sanctuary. Me and my sons." The woman finally noticed the pup strapped to Sage's front and back. Her eyes widened. "You traveled through the mountains with babies? You're either very brave or very stupid." "Desperate," Sage corrected. "I'm very desperate." After a tense standoff, the woman, who introduced herself as Riley, head of sanctuary security, escorted Sage into the village. Wolves stopped to stare as they passed, their expressions ranging from curious to shocked as they scented the pups and felt their presence. "Are those—" one wolf began. "Shut it," Riley snapped. "Let Thorn handle this." They led Sage to the largest building, a meeting hall built partially into the mountain itself. Inside, sitting at a carved wooden table covered in maps and reports, was the oldest wolf Sage had ever seen. Alpha Thorn Frostborn looked to be in his 80s in human terms, though wolves aged differently. His hair was pure white, his face marked with the kind of deep lines that spoke of a century of experience. But his eyes, pale blue and sharp as winter ice, held all the power and intelligence that had kept him alive and in control for so long. He looked up as they entered, and his gaze immediately fixed on the pups. His expression didn't change, but Sage felt the sudden weight of his attention like physical pressure. "Interesting," he said, his voice surprisingly strong. "Very interesting. Come, sit. Let me see them properly." Sage approached slowly, every maternal instinct screaming at her to protect her sons from this powerful alpha. but she'd come seeking sanctuary, and that required trust, or at least the appearance of it. She carefully unstrapped her sons, setting them on the table before Thorn. The three pups, instead of crying or fussing, sat in a row and stared at the old alpha with those unnervingly intelligent eyes. Thorn studied each pup carefully, his expression growing more intrigued. How old? 6 months. Impossible. They're too developed. I know. What are their names? Kieran, Rowan, and Ash. Thorn reached out slowly, letting each pup sniff his hand before gently touching their heads. When he touched Ash, the youngest pup grabbed his finger with surprising strength and refused to let go. His golden eyes locked on the old alpha's face. Strong, Thorn murmured. Very strong. He looked up at Sage. Do you know what you have here? Marcus said they're true alphas, all three. Marcus was correct. These are the first triplet true alphas in recorded history. Their existence will reshape pack politics across the kingdom once word spreads. He released his finger from Ash's grip and sat back. Tell me everything. How a seemingly ordinary Omega came to birth the most powerful bloodline in generations. So Sage told him. About Darius, the rejection, being declared barren, wandering alone, the impossible pregnancy, giving birth in the wilderness. She left nothing out, too exhausted to maintain pride or pretense. When she finished, Thorn was quiet for a long moment. Then, Darius Silvermoon is a fool. Rejecting you was the greatest mistake he'll ever make. Will you grant us sanctuary? Sage asked, unable to bear the suspense. I will do more than that, Thorn said. I will train your sons. When they come of age, they will be the most powerful alphas in the kingdom. And then, his smile was sharp and cold, then we'll see how the packs who rejected you feel about their choices. Relief crashed through Sage so intensely she nearly collapsed. Thank you so much. Don't thank me yet. Raising true alpha triplets will be challenging. They'll need constant training, socialization, education in both wolf and human politics. You'll have to be strong enough to guide them while letting them develop their own power. Thorn's pale eyes softened slightly. But you've already proven you're stronger than anyone gave you credit for. You survived rejection, solitary pregnancy, wilderness birth, and 3 weeks of mountain travel with newborns. You're exactly the kind of mother these particular pups need. For the first time since the rejection, Sage felt like she might actually be enough. 3 years passed in Frost Peak Sanctuary, like a heartbeat in an eternity. Sage watched her sons grow from advanced babies into phenomenal young boys who looked and acted like 6-year-olds despite being only 3. They trained with Thorn personally, learning combat, strategy, diplomacy, and the control necessary to wield the kind of power that could level armies. Kieran developed into a tactical genius, able to see battle strategies several moves ahead. Rowan became a master of diplomacy and reading people's intentions. Ash grew into pure physical power, able to shift partially at will and dominate any opponent in training. They were magnificent and terrifying. And hers. The sanctuary thrived under the unspoken protection of having 3 true alphas in residence. Wolves who would never have survived in traditional packs found home here. Healers, scholars, warriors, farmers, all contributing to a community that valued skill over bloodline and character over rank. Sage herself flourished. She discovered a talent for teaching, running the sanctuary school for young wolves. She'd built a home, made friends, found purpose beyond breeding. But the past, inevitably, came calling. It arrived in the form of a messenger, a young wolf from Silvermoon Pack, bearing an official summons sealed with Darius's crest. The annual kingdom gathering, the messenger explained nervously, clearly uncomfortable delivering this particular message. All wolves of Silvermoon blood are required to attend, including... He swallowed hard. Including those who were rejected. It's the king's decree. All pack members, former pack members, and their offspring must present themselves for the census and trials. Sage took the summons with steady hands, her eyes scanning the formal language that basically commanded her to return to the pack that had cast her out and present her sons to the kingdom. "You don't have to go," Thorn said after the messenger left. "I can send word that you're under my protection, that you renounce all ties to Silvermoon." "No," Sage said slowly, an idea forming. "I'll go. We'll go. All four of us." "That's dangerous. Once the kingdom sees your sons, they'll know that the Omega they declared Barren gave birth to the most powerful alphas in history. They'll know Darius rejected his own bloodline." Sage's smile was sharp. "I want them to know. I want Darius to see exactly what he threw away." Thorn studied her carefully. "This is about more than revenge. It's about my son's future. Right now, they're hidden here, safe but isolated. Eventually, they'll need to take their place in the kingdom. This gathering is the perfect opportunity to announce them on our terms, in a public forum where harming them would be impossible without consequences. It's a bold strategy." "I learned from bold teachers," Sage replied, thinking of everything Thorn had taught her about power and how to wield it. 3 weeks later, Sage stood at the edge of Silvermoon Pack territory with her 3 sons beside her, all 4 of them dressed in the formal attire Thorn had commissioned. Elegant but practical, expensive but not ostentatious, marking them as important without declaring specific pack affiliation. Her sons looked like young boys of 6 or 7, tall and strong, and radiating presence that made the border guard step back nervously. "State your business," the guard said, trying to sound authoritative and failing. "I am Sage Winterborn, formerly of Silvermoon Pack," Sage replied clearly. "I've been summoned to the annual Kingdom Gathering. These are my sons, Kieran, Rowan, and Ash Winterborn. We're here to answer the census." The guard's expression cycled through confusion, shock, and panic. But you were declared. How do you have sons?" "Apparently the declaration of barrenness was premature," Sage said dryly. "Will you let us pass, or should I report that Silvermoon Pack is refusing a direct royal summons?" They let her pass. The walk through Pack territory was surreal. Wolves stopped and stared, whispers following in her wake. She saw Lydia in the distance. Her old friend started crying and waving, clearly wanting to approach, but held back by her mate's restraining hand. The pack grounds were transformed for the gathering, temporary structures erected, banners flying. Wolves from dozens of packs mingling under the king's peace that prohibited violence during official gatherings. And there, on the raised platform reserved for ranking alphas, stood Darius. He looked older. 3 years had added lines around his eyes and mouth, and his golden hair showed threads of silver at the temples. Aurora stood beside him, heavily pregnant with what would be her 3rd pup by Darius, looking smugly satisfied with her position. Darius's eyes swept the crowd in boredom until they landed on Sage. He froze. His face drained of color, his jaw going slack with shock. His eyes moved from Sage to the 3 young boys standing beside her, and she watched understanding and horror dawn in his expression. The crowd noticed his reaction, turning to see what had captured the alpha's attention. Silence rippled outward as wolves recognized Sage and realized the impossible. The Barren Omega had children. "That's impossible," Aurora hissed, loud enough for nearby wolves to hear. Dr. Frost declared her barren. "Those can't be her children." "They're mine," Sage said clearly, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent crowd. "Kieran, Rowan, and Ash Winterborn. Born 15 months after my rejection from Silvermoon Pack." "That's not possible," Darius finally managed, his voice rough. "You can't. You were examined." "I was examined while being systematically dosed with contraceptive herbs by a physician in your pay," Sage said calmly, the accusation landing like a bomb. "Funny how my incurable barrenness resolved itself within months of leaving your territory and your control." The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. Darius looked like he'd been struck. Aurora's face had gone white. Before anyone could respond, Kieran stepped forward, only 3 years old but moving with the confidence of an adult, and spoke in a voice that carried supernatural authority. I am Kieran Winterborn, firstborn son of Sage Winterborn. These are my brothers, Rowan and Ash. We answer the king's summons and present ourselves for census. The power in his voice made every wolf in the vicinity freeze. This wasn't a child speaking. This was an alpha. A true alpha, commanding attention and respect. Rowan and Ash moved to flank their brother, and suddenly the temperature in the gathering seemed to drop. The presence of 3 true alphas radiating power in perfect synchronicity made even the strongest alphas in attendance take involuntary steps backward. By the moon goddess, someone breathed. They're all alphas, true alphas, all 3. The king himself, an ancient wolf who'd ruled the kingdom for 50 years, stood from his throne at the center of the gathering grounds, his eyes wide with shock and something that looked like awe. Come forward, he commanded, his voice still strong despite his age. Let me see them. Sage led her sons through the parting crowd to stand before the king. Up close, she could see the intelligence in his eyes, the power in his bearing, the wisdom that came from half a century of rulership. The king studied each boy carefully, then turned his attention to Sage. You were rejected by Silvermoon Pack? Yes, your majesty. 3 years ago, on grounds of barrenness. And yet here you stand with 3 healthy sons. 3 true alpha sons. Unless I'm very mistaken. The king's eyes moved to Darius, who looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him. Alpha Silvermoon. You rejected your mate for being unable to bear children, and she subsequently bore what appeared to be the first triplet true alphas in recorded history. Do you have anything to say? Darius's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. What could he say? The evidence stood before everyone, 3 powerful young alphas who were obviously Sage's sons, born after he'd cast her out. Your Majesty, Aurora tried. Surely there's some explanation. Perhaps they're not his. They're his, Sage interrupted coldly. DNA would prove it if you doubt. But I have no interest in claiming Silvermoon bloodline for my sons. As far as I'm concerned, they're Winterborn. They owe nothing to the pack that rejected their mother. That's not how bloodline works, Aurora snapped. They're Silvermoon heirs, whether you like it or not. Actually, the king said mildly, bloodline follows the mother in cases of rejection. When Alpha Silvermoon rejected Sage Winterborn, he legally severed all claims to any future offspring she might bear. These boys are Winterborn. They have no obligation to Silvermoon Pass. Darius looked like he'd been struck. In trying to free himself from a barren mate, he'd legally cut himself off from the most powerful bloodline in the kingdom. However, the king continued, his eyes twinkling with something that might have been amusement, these boys are true alphas. Their futures cannot be ignored or wasted. Sage Winterborn, where do you currently reside? Frost Peak Sanctuary, Your Majesty, under the protection of Alpha Thorn Frostborn. Ah, Thorn, the king smiled. That old bastard always did have an eye for collecting extraordinary wolves. Very well. You and your sons will remain under Frost Peak's protection until they come of age. At that time, they may choose to form their own pack, join an existing one, or remain independent. But make no mistake, his voice hardened. These boys are now under my personal protection. Anyone who attempts to harm, manipulate, or control them will answer to me directly. It was the highest honor and protection the king could offer. Sage felt tears burn her eyes as she bowed deeply. Thank you, Your Majesty. As they turned to leave, Darius finally found his voice. Sage, wait, please. She stopped, looked back at the mate who'd rejected her, and felt nothing but pity. I'm sorry, he said, the words falling flat and inadequate. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. If I'd known... If you'd known I could give you true alpha sons, you never would have rejected me, Sage finished. But you didn't know, so you cast me aside for a proven breeder. You made your choice, Darius. Now live with it. She walked away with her sons, her head high, leaving behind the pack that had declared her worthless and the mate who'd believed it. Behind her, whispers spread like wildfire. The rejected Omega had borne the most powerful bloodline in history, and the Alpha who'd cast her out had lost everything. 15 years after the Kingdom Gathering, the Winterborn triplets were legends throughout the realm. Kieran had formed his own pack, the largest and most powerful in the kingdom, built on merit and loyalty rather than bloodline politics. Rowan served as the king's chief diplomat, negotiating treaties and resolving conflicts with his gift for reading people and finding common ground. Ash commanded the kingdom's elite military forces, his tactical brilliance and combat prowess unmatched. All three remained devoted to their mother, visiting Frost Peak Sanctuary regularly, seeking her counsel on matters great and small. Sage, now 44, taught at the sanctuary's expanded academy and served on King's Council as an advisor on Omega rights and pack reform. She'd become a voice for wolves who didn't fit traditional roles, proving that worth wasn't determined by breeding capacity or pack rank. She never took another mate, never wanted one. Her sons were enough, and the life she'd built was full. When news came that Darius Silvermoon had died, a heart attack at 56, leaving behind Aurora and their 4 beta children, Sage felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not grief, just a distant acknowledgement that a chapter was finally completely closed. "Did you ever regret it?" Kieran asked during one of their visits. The 3 brothers gathered around their mother's fire. "Not going back to Silvermoon when we were revealed. You could have claimed Luna position, made him acknowledge us." "Never," Sage said firmly. "Going back would have meant raising you in a pack that saw you as political assets rather than my sons. Staying at Frost Peak meant you grew up loved, free, and strong enough to choose your own paths." "We're grateful," Rowan added quietly. "For everything, for fighting to keep us, for believing in us, for teaching us that power means nothing without character, for being the strongest wolf we've ever known," Ash finished, his golden eyes warm with love. Sage looked at her 3 sons, now powerful alphas in their prime, respected throughout the kingdom, living lives that honored both their strength and their hearts, and knew with absolute certainty that everything she'd endured had been worth it. She'd been rejected, declared barren, cast out as worthless, and she'd given birth to the future of the kingdom. Sometimes, the wolves everyone underestimates become the ones who change everything. And sometimes, a mother's love is the most powerful force in any realm.